Chris, you currently serve as a chair of the board of several organizations, one of them being the Rugby World Cup, Rugby League World Cup 2021. You also serve as a non-executive director of several organizations. I'm curious to know what a typical day looks like for you, and how do you allocate your time?
Thanks, Saket, and it's an absolute pleasure to join you today, and thank you for the opportunity. There isn't really a typical day, but what I do look at is how to structure a typical month and a typical year. So, first of all, making sure that all the board meetings are in place is really important, and I work with all the different organisations to make sure that none of the dates clash. So typically, I know at the start of every month what board meetings I've got. And then what I tend to do is allocate time with each sport. So I'll always have a check-in on a Friday with the chief executive of the Rugby League World Cup. And we'll all talk about what needs doing for the following week. And I also allocate some time for me, Saket, believe it or not, which I call gold time. And that's time where I have no interviews with anybody. And I just sit down and actually look ahead at the sports that I'm working with and actually start to plot my diary to have any one-to-one meetings or meetings with stakeholders or government or anybody else that I need to work with to get the very best outcome for our sport. But it's not all work. And anybody watching this podcast, and also want to emphasise the importance of making sure that the personal dates are also in diary. And actually, the first thing that's my diary. So that's my family's birthdays, any big anniversaries or events. And actually, I'll make sure I also book some holidays, because I think working in any business, not just sport, I think we all need time to recharge our batteries and get some quality thinking time and quality recovery time, as I call it. So typically, there's no structured day, but I do have a structured month. And at the moment, particularly with COVID, I'm making sure that I'm as flexible as possible. So I sometimes have to get up early to have calls in different parts of the world, and maybe stay up a bit later to have calls with other parts of the world. So, as I say, not a structured day, but a very structured month and a very structured year.
And you've been awarded with a host of accolades throughout your career, one of them being Britain's best boss. What does one have to do to become Britain's best boss?
I think you've got to have a great team, Saket. Those awards are never about me. I have the privilege of leading the team, but it is about putting a good team together. And you and I were speaking only earlier about a great book that we both read called Legacy by James Kerr, which talks about the success of the New Zealand All Blacks, and they're the most successful international sports team that has ever competed. But I actually sort of break that down then, Saket, how you put a great team together. So I have a model called RICES. So it's the word rice with S on the end. And when you break that down, the R stands for recruitment. And it's actually looking at what you're trying to achieve with your team and what skill set you need. So recruiting against that. And once you've recruited somebody, then to induct them, to make sure they understand the processes, but much more importantly, they understand the culture and the way we work around here. Because people have to get on and work well together to create a high-performing team. The C then stands for competence. So whether it's sport or whether it's business, I always have a pathway for every player or every individual to be better tomorrow than they were today, and actually have a long-term goal with them about how do we get them to be the very, very best athlete or the very, very best colleague. So that's the C. The E stands for excellence. Some people really want to be leaders of the future. So I work with them on excellence plans. And that often might be going to see other organisations or other industries. There might be some blended learning around books to read or videos to watch or conferences to attend. And then the S stands for succession, because great teams always have talent that are ready to step up. So although I'm privileged to have received some great awards, I have to say it's down to the team. and it's down to how we've worked together as a team. I've just been fortunate enough to go on stage and collect the trophy. So the credit goes to the people. It should never just go to the leader.
And the other one was, of course, the MBE. Did you ever envision that you might receive such a great honor one day? Were you ever consciously working towards it, or was it something that just happened? And what was your reaction when you first heard about it?
Well, there's a few questions there, Saket, and no, you never work towards anything like an MBA. I think people work in sport because they want to make a positive difference. You don't work for sport, really, at most levels for money, because the money is not the best. It is at elite level, the absolute uber elite. But in sport that I've worked in, nobody worked for the money. They didn't work for any recognition other than they volunteered because they cared and they wanted to make a difference to people's lives. I came from a very challenging upbringing in England. I wasn't particularly good at school, but I had a love of sport, and sport helped me learn lots of things about communication and team building, problem solving, how to win properly, how to learn properly, how to prepare. So when I got to a point where I'd achieved a level in business, I wanted to volunteer back in sport, and that's what I did. So there was a charity in Greater Manchester that I became chair of. And never once did I go to any meeting thinking about anything else other than making a difference to people's lives. So it came as a complete surprise, and hugely proud for myself and for my family, because that they've obviously supported me well. The only sadness around it, Saket, was that my mum passed away 11 years ago, and she was a huge fan of the royal family. So she'd have been really, really proud to have been with me on that day. Sadly, she wasn't, but I know she was. I think she was up there somewhere looking at me. So hugely privileged. But no one should ever go into sport for the rewards. They should go in there to make a difference to others.
Amazing. And I'm curious to know, how do you define success?
Yeah, Saket, when I read your question, I thought, well, that's such a great question. Success is personal, and it has to be for the individual, because we're all different. Some people measure success by material things or money. That's not something I've ever done. Some people measure it by relationships, and that's something that is important to me. So I get people to think about what their personal definition of success is. And the thing about motivation, and there's a great model by Frederick Hertzberg on motivation, it's different for different people. And actually, it's different for the same individual as your life moves on. So because I came from a challenging background, my motivation early on was to go and work in business because I wanted security, something I've never had in my childhood growing up, never had any money. So I wanted to start a family, and security was important. But as my children are now adults, security is less important to me, and therefore I started to follow my dream, and my dream was sport. So I really would ask people to think about what their personal definition is. For me, it's just to be healthy. It's to be a great dad to my two children, and to make a positive difference to people's lives. And I wrote a vision statement 40 years ago, and it's this. When I set about wanting to enter the adult world, I wanted to consistently deliver outstanding results and develop winners in life. And I put 3 pictures underneath that, Saket. One was cross to win, and winners set new standards. Second one was 3 arrows in a bullseye, because I believe in excellence and consistent excellence. And I think that's what the great teams have, whether that's in business or sport, and the great individual athletes. And the third one was a really important picture. It was somebody at the top of a mountain helping somebody else up. Because I think that's what matters a lot to me, is I really, really want to make a difference, a positive difference. Because I've been blessed that even though I came from a tough background and didn't have particular wealth or good education, I had some great people that helped me. So I think it was my responsibility to now go and help others. So success for me is about helping others, but it'll be different for different people. So I would never try and impose my definition of success on somebody else, because I wouldn't expect somebody else's definition to be imposed on me.
Now, you're a big supporter of causes that strive for, the betterment of mental health, well-being, children, women, equality and sustainability. Why are these causes so important to you personally? And I'd love to know your thoughts on diversity and inclusion.
Yeah. So it goes back to when I was a very young child, Saket, and my mum sat me down and she said, look, in life, don't allow anybody to be better than you. Then she said something that was really profound, but don't you ever think you're any better than anybody else. She said, it's not about money or lifestyle or cars. She said, everyone's equal. And please, as you go through life, and I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, that's over 50 years ago, she said, please treat people equal. And because I came from a tough, diverse background, I understood diversity. Also in the UK at the time, women weren't allowed to display their talent. Basically, the role was a woman stayed in the house and she cooked and she cleaned. And I had a mum that was an incredible artist, but she wasn't able to explore the talents because of the way society was. So I decided really early on that diversity was important. I went to a school that had lots of new immigrants into the UK. And because what my mum had told me, I befriended them and I learned so much about other lives and other cultures and other ways of doing things. So I think I've gone through life always wanting to follow my mum's guidance and counsel about all being equal. And as I've gone through sports, I've always asked the question about diversity and inclusion. And that's why I do support lots of areas, because Matthew Syed's just written a great book called Rebel Ideas, and it talks about the importance of diverse thinking. I can only think based on some of my experiences or based on maybe some of my reading. So when somebody says, Chris, can you put in a strategy for 18-year-old female footballers? I'm the last person that could think how an 18-year-old female footballer would think. So instead of me thinking, I go and ask. And actually, I learned so much that I didn't know, because we all have our opinions, and often that's through our childhood, through our parents, through our religion, through our workplace maybe. But it doesn't mean we're right. It just means we have a different view, and therefore I'm really keen for everybody to understand different people's views and to seek them out, and then just do the right thing on the back of that. So I just think it makes for a better informed decision-making process. And actually you can create healthier, stronger teams by having different people with different experiences around you.
Now, I heard in one of your recent interviews that you mentioned COVID was has been your fifth crisis that you've been through in your career. So, how would you compare COVID to the other crises? And the second part of the question is, what advice can you share with any business owner that is looking to lead effectively through COVID?
Yeah, well, firstly, the big difference between COVID and all the other crises is people have died as a result of COVID. Often the previous crises have caused difficult situations, maybe unemployment or businesses failing, but certainly not the scale of infections and the scale of death. But that said, Saket, it is a crisis, and therefore my advice to businesses and individuals is firstly that be patient, because I come from a country that's been involved in 2 wars, in the last century. We've been in a world where we've seen the Great Depression in the 1930s. We've seen 9/11 atrocities in the US. We've seen dot-com bust. We've seen global banking crisis. And all of those things have happened, but we're still here. So therefore, I'm a great believer in being patient. In sport, we use the phrase control the controllables. I can't control the pandemic. I can only control what actions I'm responsible for. So firstly, it's be patient and understand that it might take time. Although countries have found vaccines now, the whole distribution model will take time, so be patient. The second one is don't lose your self-belief and self-esteem, because before the pandemic, we were good at what we did, and we did the right things, and that shouldn't change. And you know, some people I know have sadly lost the job, but I don't want their identity to be lost alongside the job, because they're still good people with good skills. They can offer lots, and over a period of time, the economy will bounce back. I am absolutely sure. And as a result of that, there'll be people recruiting again. And that leads me to the third thing, which is continue to do new things and continue to learn. So more people may have some time on their hands. We've just been locked down again in the UK for a minimum of 6 weeks. If that means there's less things to do from a work-wise, then maybe learn some new skills or read some new books or make a choice about setting a goal on being healthier. I talk about the difference between being employed and employable. If you're employable, you'll have a job for life. If you're employed and you choose not to learn about what the future might hold in terms of skill set, then there might become a day where somebody doesn't want your skills anymore. So I think for individuals, it's that be patient, have self-belief in what you are, but continue to learn. For businesses, it is about taking this opportunity to think about what will the future look like. We've seen the most amazing proliferation in technology, Saket, in the last 12 months. You know, I'm minded of a statistic that there were 10 million Zoom users globally on the 1st of March 2020. By the 31st of May, there are almost 500 million Zoom users. So technology's changed. Amazon has delivered more parcels in the United Kingdom than ever before. So things change. And I think as businesses, instead of reopening the same way you were, why don't you think about what would our new clients of the future want, or new customers? What are our new distribution models? How would we teach and train or look after our people differently? So again, this is just a moment in time where we get to stop because Mother Nature has stopped us. But why waste that time watching box sets all day? I think businesses and individuals have the great chance to think about the future and prepare themselves for the future, because it's going to come and it's going to have many periods where it's a really positive future as well. So that would be my advice to individuals and businesses as a result of the crisis.
What is it that makes great leadership in your view?
Very simply, in one sentence, it's to serve others. That's it. You know, leadership's a privilege, Saket. Throughout the world, when I visited businesses or been in sports, when people come home after a day, either at the office or on the track or on the field, there's still a question, you know, how was it today? And I think leadership ultimately defines the answer that an individual is going to give. If you say it was great today, that's because the leader's created a great environment. If it's poor, it's because the leader's created a poor environment. So I think very simply, leadership is about serving others. And if I was to break that down, it's about caring. So I sat down with one of my teams and we created a vision for our future. And we said we wanted to care and show that we care. Because some people say they care, Saket, but the behaviours completely let them down. So I think talk is cheap. I said, let's show that we care. And we came out with 5 statements underneath that. Let's care for ourselves. Let's care for our colleagues. Let's care for our customers. Let's care for our community. and let's care for our business. But let's show we care for ourselves. Let's show we care for our colleagues. Let's show we care for our customers. Let's show we care for our community. And let's show we care for our business. Somebody asked me why business was the last one. I says, because if we care for ourselves and show we care, if we care for ourselves and show we care for our colleagues, and care and show we care for our customers, care and show we care for our community, the business will be fine. Because it will have done all the right things, and therefore it will be very successful. But every business is a people business. And I think that's the crux of leadership for me. Then to add to a couple of things around the business, you would then look into the future. And I talk about 3 revolutions for every business. The 3 revolutions that are occurring are the technology revolution, we've just mentioned that. The consumer revolution. People can buy globally now, and it can be delivered in no time at all. That's a whole new phenomena. We can buy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even on Christmas Day or any other holiday like Diwali or Eid or anything like that. And then the third resolution is the world order. The world order's changed, and it's certainly changed in the last 9 months because the pandemic became the determinant factor in how countries had to behave economically as well as physically. So leaders need to just look into the future and lead their teams into a successful future. And then finally, leaders just need to do the right thing. Not the cheap thing, not the easy thing, just do the right thing. And I think that's important as well. So it's about serving others in its simple form, but I have some key principles underneath that, Saket.
So you worked extensively in finance. You worked extensively in sports. Looking back at this illustrious career, if you had to start all over again, would you pick a particular industry of these two? Would you pick finance or sport, or would you prefer having both again, and why?
Oh, great question, Saket. Great question. I'd always say both. I did it my way because I wanted to have some security. I think I said that earlier. And once I'd created a secure environment for myself and my family, then I followed my passion. I still did lots of sport in between, but giving up the time from a traditional business, businesses that I worked in, was a big step because, as I said earlier, sport's not always lucrative at the highest level. And often it's around volunteering, and the new role I've announced today is a volunteer. It's unpaid, but it's a passion. So the answer is I'd always do both. And the reason being, Saket, is because I think business can learn a lot from sport. And if I can give you one really quick example, when I sit down with my teams and we talk about a meeting, we follow a sporting principle that would not normally have been brought into business, but for sport. And it's this: when I sit down with my teams and we talk about meetings, we follow this sporting principle. Great athletes warm up. That's what a great athlete does. A professional athlete, elite athlete will warm up. I ask the question, how do we warm up for our business meetings? The second one is, after you've warmed up, the athlete goes out and has a period of peak performance. And I then ask our team, when we're in the meeting, what would our peak performance look like? Questions would ask, research would do, flexibility in our thinking, look at the conditions, because that's what an athlete does during it. And then after the athletes perform, they warm down. And they warm down to avoid injury and get ready to be at the very peak the next time they have to perform. So I ask questions of our teams in business. How do we warm down? What actions do we need to do? How quickly can we get them done and get them to other people if they are the ones that are going to help us achieve? And then the final one for an athlete is, after they've warmed down, they have quality recovery time. And I make sure that all my team have quality recovery time after meetings. Now, I'd have never been able to bring that into the business world had I not been in the sport world. And then the other way around, I think sport can learn a lot from business. Is often sport is obsessed with what goes on the field. Now, in business, we look at what's known as a balanced business scorecard, where we look at our people, we look at our customers, we look at our operation, and we look at our financials, and making sure all of those blend well together, we have a balance to make sure we can deliver on all of those areas. Sometimes sport focuses so much on the performance that it doesn't understand the operations or the risk or the financials. And that's why some sports financially are in a difficult place, is because they've not really looked at how you would run a business. People think sport and business are separate. No. Sport needs to operate like a business. It really does. And again, some of the people that you and I were spoken about previously, we know that there's a business approach in sport and they're more successful. That's why the book Legacy is such a powerful one. So the answer is, I'd always do both. I think I could learn so much from each that I could bring to the other discipline. So if you get a chance to do both, I'd encourage everybody to do so.
The final question before we let you go, Chris, what is your most memorable match day experience and why?
Yeah, that's okay. This was the most difficult question for me. I've been blessed to have been to some great sporting events. Excuse me. But the one I'm going to choose is in 2019. And the venue's Lords. And it's England versus New Zealand in the World Cup cricket final. I cannot think of an event that had such an impact on me. And there's two reasons. As a young child growing up, I was obsessed by cricket. And I never forget watching the first ever Cricket World Cup final in 1975 between the West Indies and Australia. And it was the most amazing game of cricket that ebbed and flowed. West Indies were 50 for 3. And then a Lancashire player called Clive Lloyd came in and hit a century. The most amazing century I'd seen in my life at that time. So I've always been a fan of cricket. And then to get the opportunity to go with my son to Lords to watch England in the World Cup final itself was going to be a great occasion. But for those people who remember that match, it would change. England are going to win. No, New Zealand are going to win. England are going to win. New Zealand are going to win. And what a way in terms of theatre to finish a World Cup final with a super over. And even then, it could have changed hands. So the greatest live sports event I can ever talk about is watching England win the World Cup at the home of cricket, Lords, because it brought back lots of memories from my childhood. But actually to be there with my son was really, really special. So that's my moment. A lot of people may have said Manchester United and various other things, but no, that was the one.
Chris, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, Saket, thank you so much, and my best wishes for 2021 to everybody who watches and listens to this podcast.